Yeah.
Recording in progress. All right. So we went over 3 things that have nothing to do with diet and exercise in one video that are affecting your weight loss. Then, hey, my kid. Then we
Hey, kid.
hey kid. Then we said we broke down to 3 things: hormones, gut health, environmental factors. We went over hormones. Today we're going over gut health. Big topic, right? When we think about it, how many people do you do client work with who have some sort of digestion problem? Mike, how many people have you worked with on their digestion in your life? A lot, a ridiculous amount, right?
Yeah, probably couldn't put a number on it.
What is the number one thing that I am the least educated on to help people with? To me, it's gut health. For me, I always go to Mike, right? Gray, you worked with Mike on gut health.
Mhm.
Did you not? Like
Yeah,
the gut, the skin. You
yeah,
your body doesn't like rice.
yeah. Doesn't digest rice, which I've gotten better though, which is great. But Mike kind of walked me through like elimination diets and etc. So
But how many
it's
times do
gotten
we
better.
tell people I have a hard time digesting some foods, eat white rice? That's kind of a go-to, but not for Gray,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I think gut health is going to be a big one. We've gotten great response from hormones, simply because everybody thinks they can't lose weight because of their hormones. Because of the standard American diet, because of the fast food, because we eat foods out of a box, because of soil depletion. Mike, would you say that? You sent me that video that scared the living breaks out of me. It kept me up until like 1 o'clock one night. And I'm like, well, I'm just gonna die. We're all gonna die. We're all gonna die
We're all
from
gonna die.
DDT. From 75% of our food has DDT in it. I'm going out and drinking. I'm gonna chug a bottle of alcohol for the first time in a year or 6 years. You know. So we'll jump right into it. How do I know if I have a gut issue? What is it? What is it not? And what are my symptoms? So if you're watching this video and you're saying, maybe I have a gut issue. Some gut issues are obvious. You have wicked diarrhea.
That's a dead giveaway.
Or you can't poop, right? Or you have indigestion.
Yeah.
That's obvious, right? Mike sends out, and I might send it out, the little things of poop. What normal
I love
poop
those.
like?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bristol
You
stool
know,
chart.
you
What is
guys
it
know
called?
I
What is
love
it
to
called?
talk about poop.
What is it
It's
called?
the Bristol stool chart.
Bristol stool chart.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at this and someone's watching this video and they say, how do I know if I have a gut issue? What is a gut issue? What is not a gut issue? What are my symptoms? Throw some symptoms out there. Throw a few that are obvious, but throw a few out there that might be like, holy crap, that's a gut issue.
Yeah. And this is where I think everybody assumes that if you have a gut issue, it will be GI related symptoms. A lot of times it is. But if you talk to most medical providers now, you're seeing that so many of the things are being linked to the microbiome or the bacteria in your GI tract. So even things like autoimmune diseases. So everybody's assuming it's nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea are the only GI related complications. But you can see, like let's take, an autoimmune disease like lupus or Hashimoto's. It doesn't really matter whether or not you know what those things are. It's just basically an alteration in your immune system. And a lot of times you're seeing that now linked to changes in the microbiome. But we know that it's probably not one driving the other. It's probably this crosstalk between both. And so this is where you're starting to see there is a gut-brain axis where your gut is talking to your brain and vice versa. So all the neurotransmitters that your brain utilizes to make you feel happy, sad, frustrated, rewarded, motivated, all those are made in your GI tract from certain compounds that you break down and synthesize or create from food. And then there's also a gut-lung axis where the microbiome is talking to the organisms that line the inner aspect of your lung, that mucosa. There's a gut-skin axis. So you can have GI issues and it shows up as acne. It can show up as eczema. It can show up as psoriasis. You can have infections in your GI tract that show up as skin-related changes. Psoriasis is a big one, that there's a large fungal component with that sometimes, to where someone can have fungal related overgrowths in their gut that are subclinical. And so they're not going to be in the hospital for these sort of things, but they're just, they tend to have a harder time keeping these things in check. So as such, you get these systemic effects and you pick them up on the skin. You can also see changes where you'll also have kind of this gut muscle axis where how well you break down and absorb food, like we talked about in one of the other videos, determines how well you recover and then how well you actually physically adapt and change from your training. So everybody on social media is just into, you got to do these exercises and you got to eat these foods. And that's great. But really the disconnect between those two things is the input is the exercise and the food, but the output in terms of the muscle that you see, there's one key step in there, and that's converting that food into muscle. And that's really where the microbiome in the gut comes into play. So obviously, if you have chronic symptoms, so things that are lasting for, more than a few weeks that are plaguing you consistently at each meal, that's an indicator that, hey, you probably have something going on gut-wise. So number one, bloating is not normal after every single meal.
Yeah.
Let's just throw that out there. That's a common thing you see joked about on social media with a lot of people that are into fitness. Like, look at how swollen my abdomen is after I've eaten. I look like I'm 9 months pregnant. That is not a normal phenomenon. You're either eating way too much fiber or you have too much fermentation going on within your GI tract for a variety of different reasons. And that can be bacterial, or that can be lack of hydrochloric acid in the stomach, all of these different things. And so that's where you're understanding that's not normal. The other thing to know is that your GI tract should move every single day. So that's one of the questions that I ask people, and I'll say, do your bowels move every single day? Well, no, it's about once every 3 days, but I thought that was normal. Normal transit time for the average human is going to be about 24 to 72 hours from when you eat a meal to when it actually exits your colon and ends up in your toilet. But that does not mean that you should eat a meal and then not go to the bathroom for 3 days, because you're going to have other things coming into your system at that time that are going to be moving that meal along, and so on and so forth. So that's where you want to just keep in mind that number one, after a meal, you should not feel overly bloated. You should not feel like there's an immediate loose stool response. There's sometimes a peristalsis response where the bowels will move, and that is normal. But you should be moving your bowels at least once per day. And you should be able to eat a wide variety of food without any corresponding symptomatology. And that includes things like itchy skin. That includes things like congestion, which is a big one that everybody overlooks, especially with dairy, for example. That drives a lot of allergic related signs and symptoms due to something called histamine, which is a chemical that makes everything swell up and it makes everything run in terms of your mucus. And so that's where people overlook that. Oh, I had some ice cream and now I'm congested for the next 3 hours. I don't know what that was. That's a food allergy. And so that tells you more about what's going on in your gut. The other thing people need to understand along with those things is your tolerance and your ability to eat all these foods and not react to them tells us how well your immune system is functioning with something called oral tolerance. It's your ability to see all these different foods within your GI tract, for your immune system to see them and not react to them and play whack-a-mole with every single different food that comes down the esophagus. And so if you have good tolerance, then you can ingest a lot of a wide diversity of foods. And this supports the health and the growth of the bacterial organisms in your gut. If you find that your food choices are getting more and more limited, you're reacting to foods. I've had some patients where they react to broccoli and avocado and sesame seeds. And they're like, these are all healthy foods. I shouldn't feel bad eating them.
Yeah.
And that's where we need to understand that your gut is your immune system and your immune system is in your gut. And so if you have a gut problem, you also have an immune problem. And that's why you're reacting to foods. The foods are not the problem. They're just a witness to the crime. The crime is what's going on in your GI tract and also your immune system.
So person is out there watching this video. They're like, well, I get bloating. I get some skin issues. I'm irregular in my bowel movements. It upset stomach. Certain foods hurt my stomach. Obviously, I need to get a probiotic. I hear that all the time. I bloat after I eat. I'm not digesting food. I need to get a probiotic. I feel like that's like the go-to for the general population when they feel like they have anything wrong with digestion, stomach ache. Tell me, for somebody out there who wants to quick run to the grocery store and buy a probiotic at Walmart. Who needs a probiotic? What's a probiotic do? And why is that not the right thing to do? Is just go straight run to a probiotic?
Yeah. It can definitely help, but you really need to understand what's causing the problem. Like, for example, if we go back to the hydrochloric acid conversation from earlier, it's important to understand that when you ingest food, it needs to meet this acid bath in your stomach. So the pH of the stomach is about 2 to 3, and that's just extremely acidic. If you took hydrochloric acid and like poured it on this desk, it would eat through the desk, it would eat through the floor, it would dissolve it entirely. So that's where we need to start thinking about if somebody gets bloated, the first thing we want to think about is, number one, what kind of food is this person eating? Because that can be a big driver of that in terms of, is it a minimally processed food that's naturally occurring? So is it kind of a single ingredient food? If it is, that's okay. Then the second thing we want to ask about is, how's this person meal hygiene while they're eating? The thing that people need to understand and take away from this is that there are many different things that you directly control with every single meal that positively or negatively influence your digestion. So number one, did you take time to really sit and cook that meal and smell that meal while it was cooking? That could be in a microwave while you're heating it up. But if you're rushing around and you're on your phone and you're working while you're eating, all these things shut down digestion. Your body has kind of two different systems. Number one is the rest and digest, parasympathetic. That turns on digestion, that turns on the production of sex hormones, and that helps you to recover and grow. Growth hormone is another one that gets secreted overnight. The other side of that is this fight or flight, and that shuts down digestion. It shuts down stress hormones. So you can either be stressed out or you can be relaxed. Those are basically the two ends of the spectrum. So if you're working while you're eating and your meal hygiene is poor, and you're not taking time to sit, to relax, the first thing that you're going to notice is your mouth is going to be a lot more dry. And so when you get to that rest and digest, what happens is you start to salivate. I always explain it to people. When you go for a massage, you may not notice it, but you're going to start to salivate because this is your body telling you, hey, we're more relaxed. We're ready for that food if you're going to eat it now. Same thing happens when you sit down. I always tell people, your 3 cues when you sit down to eat a meal is, number one, have I taken 5 nice, slow, deep breaths? And when you exhale, you want to feel like you slouch and relax a little bit. The second thing is 5, 10, 15 rule. Did I take at least, of course, it just flew out of my head. Did I take at least 5 seconds in between each bite to fully chew that bite? Did I take at least 10 seconds to kind of put down my fork and savor that meal? And then did I take at least 15 minutes in total to eat that meal? And so that's kind of just a good rule of thumb, 5, 10, 15 rule. And then the third thing is, again, that salivation cue. If you start to take those nice, slow, deep breaths, you'll feel yourself start to salivate. Now you're in kind of more of that relaxed state. So now that we get past all of that, somebody's like, well, I'm still getting bloating and I'm doing all these things before the meal. I'm eating slow. I'm taking time to savor the meal. Okay. So now the next piece of the puzzle we want to ask about is, does this person need a little bit of support with digestive enzymes, with things that increase hydrochloric acid production? And if you're someone that you've taken proton pump inhibitors or things that dampen down acid production in the stomach, like Zantac and Pepcid, and these over-the-counter things, let's say you get chronic heartburn and bloating all the time, if you reduce that acid concentration low enough in the stomach, you're going to bloat, because now you don't have acid to break down all of that food that should be there, and it starts to ferment and sit a little bit longer. Not only that, you'll see in people that stay on these drugs in the long term, years, they'll absorb less B12, less magnesium, less iron, and a lot of those micronutrients you need to support different steps of digestion, one of them being production of hydrochloric acid. So you're kind of working your way down the digestive tract with all these different steps. But like I said, first thing is, what are you eating? Second thing is, what environment are you eating it in? If you're doing 90 down the interstate eating a McGriddle, you're probably going to be bloated. But the third piece of that is, are you taking any medications that have side effects that are digestive related? Another one that's very common with people is metformin. And so if you take a high enough dose of metformin, you're going to get loose stools, you're going to get diarrhea. Can you take things that offset that? Maybe, but you're really just putting a Band-Aid on a bigger problem. Let's regulate your blood sugar better so you can get off such a high dose of metformin. So that's the third thing you want to be thinking about. And then the fourth thing you want to be thinking about is, well, maybe now I need a probiotic. Please keep in mind that certain probiotics do require temperature, so a low enough temperature while they're shipped, and also while they're stored. So you go to the grocery store, some will be in the refrigerated section. That's great. So that's the first thing to check off. If you're getting it off Amazon, it's probably not shipped on dry ice. It's kind of a tip off. And Amazon doesn't refrigerate any of their supplements, just an FYI for everybody out there. So fish oil, probiotics, would never recommend it through Amazon for that reason. And then the other thing to think about with probiotics is there's different classes. So there's different microorganisms. There's really 3 big classes. There's bifido and lactobacillus, which everybody knows about. There's another yeast called Saccharomyces boulardii, which Josh, you and I have talked about this in the past. It worked really well for someone that you know. And then there's a third class called spore-based probiotics. Which one someone needs in certain situations will drastically change what probiotic you get, how long you take it, and also kind of what the composition of your gut is at the moment. So that's why it's very hard to give people just generic, hey, take this. Everybody takes this, because it's so individualized. And that's kind of where medicine is heading now with integrative medicine. It's recognizing every single person is different biochemically and epigenetically. So how your genes are expressing. And if we disregard that and just give a one-size-fits-all approach, it might work for some people, but there's going to be a lot of people that are left in the lurch. And so now we're having these conversations to help people individualize more.
So if somebody comes to you and it's like, I think I should have a probiotic, you're going to address sleep, works, eat hygiene. Are you sitting down to eat your meals? Are you on the run? Are you slamming food in your face? Are you taking 15 minutes to eat?
Right.
Because you might possibly not be digesting food because your sleep hygiene sucks.
Right.
Every meal might be in your car, on the run, while you work. Like, are you sitting down and eating a meal? You touched on this a little bit. Medicines, medications, over-the-counter prescribed meds. What medicines out there could somebody be taking that could affect their health, their gut health? And then like foods that can affect your gut health. So what are you talked about fermented foods before, right? Touch a little bit on somebody out here who's like, hey, I take a bunch of medicines. What could they be doing that could affect their gut health from a medicine side?
Number one caveat of this conversation is do not stop any medication ever.
Always. Yes.
Based on this conversation. So there's going to be certain things that an individual might have to take, and they're going to have GI related side effects as a result of that. And that's okay. It just is what it is. That's where you want to see what can I do to buffer that. And so that's where people need to be aware of. If you're given a medication, you may not always have time to discuss all the litany of side effects, but you can literally go to drugs.com and look up every single drug out there, all the most common side effects in every single system of the body, and the percentage of individuals that have those side effects. This is available to everyone, consumers, providers. It's not protected by a paywall. You just literally go and search. So that'll be the first thing I would encourage everybody to do. The more drugs you have on board, it's called polypharmacy, but the more you have on board, the harder it is for anyone, whether it's a pharmacist, a physician, anyone on your medical care team, to predict how those are going to interact, because there's no long-term studies on somebody that's on 20 different medications. It just doesn't exist because there's too many variables. So that's where, do your due diligence. You have to be informed as the consumer, and nobody else is really going to do all that legwork for you. And that's okay. That's just another step that then we have to be aware of. So that'll be the first thing. And you don't have to know what it all does, but if you notice significant GI considerations with a drug, pay attention to that. Second thing is, it's figuring out, are there any medications that are going to give me significant side effects? And if so, can I discuss these with my provider and see, is there a way to lower dosage like we talked about with metformin? Because there's many things that you can do that don't require medication that regulate blood sugar better. For example, you can add cinnamon to meals and it regulates your blood sugar. It improves insulin sensitivity. Now, I'm not saying you can reduce your metformin just by swapping in more cinnamon with your meals, but there's a variety of things that you could probably layer on together synergistically that would allow you to reduce that medication. And if you can use a lower efficacious dose, it still gives you a good response. You lower the side effect profile as well. So that's where you want to be thinking about as a consumer. You may not understand the drugs and all that they do, but in general, the higher you go on dosages with some medication, the higher the rate of side effects and the higher the intensity of side effects. So being aware of these things is very important as the consumer of the medication, even if you don't know what it does exactly. And then really the other thing to be thinking about was food choices. So you're like, okay, well, I'm taking this medication, maybe it gives me a little GI upset or whatever it is. So what can I now do with my diet? And the first thing I would tell you is, if you are eating a wide variety of foods that are naturally occurring, that are single ingredient foods, so they don't have a nutrition label, sweet potatoes, broccoli, there's no nutrition label on that. And I'm talking about a huge variety of food. So when you go to the grocery store every single week, you want to swap out all your vegetables and all your fruits and buy completely new ones. Same thing with your protein sources. Rotate through those. Carb sources, rotate through those. Give the immune system a wide array of things to look at, because if you start getting stressed out, underslept, your food choices are very limited, you're training way too hard, you're not giving yourself enough time to recovery, and now you're adding a ton of stimulants, I can tell you what's going to happen in the long run. All your favorite foods that you eat all the time, you're going to start to react to. And you may not perceive that with gut symptoms, but now all of a sudden you eat lunch and an hour later you're extremely fatigued and you have brain fog and you can't think clearly and you don't know what's going on. Maybe you just need more coffee. Or it's your immune system that's pissed off because of all the other things you're doing. And now you're throwing in all of these antigens, these things the immune system sees and reacts to, and you're throwing them in on a consistent daily basis multiple times. You can see this with coffee. You can see this with even healthy foods like I talked about. So again, wide variety of foods, rotate through them as much as you can. And then on top of that, pay attention. This is a big, big thing where the more people can become aware of how they feel based on what they just ate, this is massive, massive. And I don't want people to be hyper neurotic, but it's developing a sense of consciousness to associate your current state subjectively with what you objectively just did, whether that be an event or a food you consumed or a supplement or a medication. How did that change where I am right now? And that disconnect is big. A lot of people just can't figure it out, and that's okay. But jotting down notes, paying attention. I just noticed this random thing popped up the other day. Maybe it's unrelated, but I'm just going to keep tabs on that for a few days and just see if I notice a trend. You can figure out a lot of these things on your own. Oh, well, every single night that I have ice cream, I wake up super bloated in the morning. But if I have a protein shake before I go to bed, it's not there. Is it the sugar? Is it the dairy?
Yeah.
You'll know, dig deeper. So that I would start there. And obviously a lot of this we're going to dig really deep on in other videos. We can just do gut health videos in the future for all these topics, but that's really a good place to start. And people need to be thinking about these principles. I always tell people, don't focus on rules, focus on principles, because those can be applied in so many different situations. Rules, you have this framework, but you can't go outside the framework. So if the situation requires you to deviate, you're stuck. So focus on the principles first.
It's unfortunate though, how Western medicine addresses this. Have you guys ever seen the commercial for the medication that helps you go to the bathroom if you've taken too many pain pills?
I don't think so.
There's a commercial. There's a medicine that you can now take if you have pain pill induced constipation. So if you're on pain meds, which cause you to not poop, they now have something to help you poop. But nobody wants to talk about why you're on pain meds.
Yeah.
Right?
I never knew the congestion part. That was like an immune response, like a GI response. But I always get congested after I drink alcohol. So talk about alcohol with your gut.
Okay.
Just a little bit.
Right.
I think we have like 5 minutes left.
Yeah, 3.5 minutes. We still got to wrap it up with the 3 things that they can do, but touch on alcohol.
Yep. So number one thing people need to take away is semi-related to alcohol, but also semi-related to this conversation we've been having on medication and the medical industry in general. Everything that you eat plays a direct role in the entirety of your physiology, regardless of what your condition is, whatever it is medically. So please, if you've been told that what you eat makes no difference at all in X, Y, or Z condition, that is entirely false. So it definitely 100% makes a difference, even if it's not directly related to, I don't know, let's throw out the big C word, cancer. No, it doesn't play a direct role in that, but all the other systems that are affected by the food affect that. So food plays a massive role in everything all the time. It 100% does that. And alcohol playing a massive role in this as well. The number one thing that people need to understand is 2 big components with alcohol. Number one, it is antimicrobial. So pre-antibiotics and pre-hand sanitizer days, pre-Lysol days, everything was cleansed and killed with alcohol. So Civil War, you're doing surgery, you poured alcohol over the site to sterilize it. So when you ingest a shot of Everclear, you are doing something very similar to the microbiome within your GI tract.
And your brain.
In the long run, probably not advantageous. Number two with alcohol is, regardless of how you feel when you wake up for alcohol, you have more nocturnal sleep awakenings, meaning that your sleep is more fragmented over the course of your night, even if you subjectively feel like you slept. So alcohol is a downer, meaning that it shuts off a lot of that excitatory aspect of the brain, so people fall asleep a little bit easier. But it will still disrupt your sleep, which plays a direct role in the health of your gut. So in the long run, if you're concerned about gut health and you want to optimize your health or your performance, alcohol can't be a regular, consistent part from an excessive intake perspective.
Yeah. All right. We're down to the big three. Got a minute and a half. You've watched this video and you want to know, what can I do? What 3 things can I do right off the rip, watching this video, to improve my gut health? I want to take the quiz. I'm going to say that number 1 is food variety. Is that true?
I would take it a step further, and I would actually do spice variety. Spices actually have higher antioxidant levels than all foods combined. Season and spice your foods exceedingly well, and then rotate in all that food diversity.
Cool. So add spices to your foods.
Right.
Food variety.
Right.
Address your food hygiene. Sit down, eat your food, take your time, don't be stressed. Right. So if you're watching this video, add spices, improve food variety, eat whole foods, address your food hygiene.
Yeah. And don't be neurotic. Again, you got to live life, but pay attention when you splurge and see how you feel.
Right.
Well, we're gonna end it. We're going to shoot this out. I think this is a great conversation. If anybody needs to hit us up, and we'll help you with your gut health.